Intro. Hello, Internet. Welcome to Wednesday's serial. This week is Invincible Iron Man. So, like so many other characters, I want to talk to you about my understanding of the character before I talk about the book, because I feel it's only fair you know where I'm coming from before I try to give you any sense of review. Iron Man is a character that I've known about. I used to watch the cartoon as a kid during the Marvel Action Hour. And since then, I didn't care so much. I only really started reading Iron Man comics when the Invincible Iron Man started in conjunction with the movie, because that's about when I cared, because that's about when Iron Man was presented to me as a dynamic character and not just a dude in a suit. And honestly, prior to that, what had hooked me was the Ultimate Universe's Iron Man, which in my opinion is a far more interesting character, but can only read, handful of comics so many times. So I was sticking with it, but every now and again I kind of question buying this book, as the Invincible Iron Man is really more about the terrible Tony Stark, where you see all this corporate whatnot, and then you occasionally see him get in the Iron Man suit or little bits about the Iron Man suit, but very little of it is actually action, but actually corporate sabotage or corporate understanding for these comics, which can be interesting. However, after having read Wildcats 3.0, which is also a very corporate understanding book, this in that aspect pales in comparison on literally every level. After reading that, it actually would be a fair argument to say it's not well done at all and not very well written, despite all the accolades that Matt Fraction has gotten for writing these comics, which makes me think that Mike Carey was really overlooked and far ahead of his time when he was writing these books for Wildstorm back in the day. Also, it should be noted that I've heard from people who continually read the Avengers, whereas I do not because I don't care, that the understanding of Iron Man in this book versus other key details are in question. In this book, it said that right now, Tony Stark, Iron Man, and they're known to be the same identity, that's shared, is poor, but he has offered up property and funding for one of the Avengers teams, whereas right now he's scraping by and putting everything he has into one project. So those things don't quite click, and they don't really work for continuity, but I guess at the other time they are two separate stories, so take it for what you will. However, I will say that does seem to be a general huge error, and this is why they have communal editors, and kind of defeats the point of having a Marvel universe. So this recent arc has been about Sasha Hammer, who's the descendant of Justin Hammer, who's someone who rivaled the Starks long ago, is creating something called Detroit Steel, kind of an answer to Iron Man this later age. I'm going about it in a different way, but essentially a mechanized suit that's piloted by someone, but though in much more of an anime fashion, despite being Detroit Steel and very American sounding. Ironic. And they are together in a Lamborghini after meeting at Stark's party, and there's a bit here in the beginning, and honestly it's the first 3 pages, so I think that's before it can count as spoiler territory. Yes, no? I'm not quite sure how that works. Where Tony Stark talks about, my life would be so much easier if I crashed this car, but I shouldn't do it. And she says, well, wouldn't the hero shouldn't do that? And he's like, well, I'm not that heroic. And I paused, because Iron Man is understood to be one of the Golden Avengers, one of the original Avengers, and one of the standbys that everyone compares themselves to in the Marvel U. And whereas I understand he doesn't remember Civil War and whatnot, there was a point in there where he went through and said we need to hold ourselves to certain standards, and was making himself kind of the example, and that's why Spider-Man believed in him so, and caused that whole story arc where Mr. Fantastic fell in line with him and kind of idolized him during that arc as well. And here you have that, and like I said, there was a whole arc where Stark had to download his brain elsewhere, and then he forgot everything, so the events of pretty much right before Civil War to wherever that arc ended, supposedly the character doesn't remember. However, he does state that he believes he would have done everything very similarly. As such, effectively, that belief would still be there. The core ideals, from the way I read that book. Other people might have read that bit differently, however, that's a lot of conjecture. I think to say that Iron Man should hold himself to a heroic standard isn't stretching too far. And to see that written in this book, to me, says that this is a poor characterization of the character, which happens, but it kills me to read it in a book like this, because if you don't know, the Invincible Iron Man has won awards, is highly acclaimed, people consider it to be some of the best writing, and here you have this moment where he's considering crashing a car to kill someone because he knows he'll barely survive because he's one with the suit now. And it's just so bleh. It's just so odd and gritty, and not that I mind that in a comic, but it doesn't work for the character, and that sure as heck isn't the sort of thing I'm looking for when I pick up an Iron Man comic. That's what I look for in more of a modern noir-esque story. And it just hit me as so bizarre, and I don't know. And I don't know if anyone else has been reading this book religiously, but I find myself purposely considering pretty much month to month whether or not I want to continue with this title, and this is another great reason why, and actually the most poignant why, and reason why I thought it would make a good video here, is this book is honestly not that well written. It's compelling, it's interesting, the art is well done, but as far as a Marvel U book, I don't think it measures up. Now, admittedly, there was a Mandarin issue with an annual that I spoke about before that was just beautifully done. Admittedly, the art wasn't as great, but the writing was well done. I'm sticking around for that arc to end, but after that, unless that really hooks me, I think I'm going to drop this book. And so the question that I would like to pose to anyone viewing this video, hopefully many, is if you are reading this book, have you been considering dropping it, or is it something that you will keep on your pull list as long as it maintains what it's been doing for these past 30 issues? Also, similarly, if some of you have only read an arc and gave it up, I'd like to know about that. Or if people have heard about it and they're dying to read it and they just think I'm insane, I'd like to know that too. So thanks, peace, I'll talk to you later.